Do you know that three most dangerous things in the world? It's not spiders, snakes, and stinging nettles, or whatever it is. It's sex, money, and power. And today we're going to talk about power. We're going to talk about power because it's Palm Sunday. Who'd have thought that Palm Sunday would be a talk about power? Well, you're about to find out. So let's remind ourselves of the story. If you've got a Bible, turn to Matthew chapter 21, but it will be up on the screen. As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the mountain of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there and her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away." This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. "Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. They bought the donkey and the colt and placed their cloaks on them for Jesus to sit on. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them out on the road. The crowd that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest heaven!" Then Jesus entered Jerusalem. The whole city was stirred and asked, "Who is this?" The crowd answered, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." Now, listen. You need to understand, as we get into this, that I love Palm Sunday. I really do. One of my favourite lines in the whole of Scripture comes from Luke's account of this, where it goes, "Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, 'Teacher, rebuke your disciples. I tell you,' he says, 'if they keep quiet, the very stones will cry out.'" And I love that. As someone who loves to worship, that really stirs me, because Jesus is using a metaphor, but what he's saying is, even if no one was here, what is happening here is such an act that even nature joins in. Even nature joins in worship. Anyway, so I hope, my plan is that I don't want to ruin Palm Sunday for you. But I've got a take on Palm Sunday that I think we really need to talk about, especially today, especially in these days. There's something in this story that is important for us right now. Something powerful that I hope that you'll spot. Now, if you've been around church for a while, and looking at you, most of you have, okay, then you'll know that you might have a mental picture of Palm Sunday, kids waving little paper palms and singing Hosanna, Hosanna, which feels like a celebration. It almost feels like a Christian version of a carnival. And they're praising Jesus, the King. We sing Hosanna like it means hallelujah, like it's a happy word. But in fact, Hosanna doesn't mean praise. It means save us now. It's a plea. It's a cry. It's a desperate shout. It's not, "Yay, Jesus!" It's, "Jesus, do something. Save us right now." And that cry, it's political, it's social, it's actually revolutionary. The people aren't asking Jesus to save their souls so that they can go to heaven when they die. That's not what was on their mind. What they wanted, what they expected, was for Jesus to save them from Rome. See, they'd seen would-be messiahs come and go. Each one of them promised to overthrow the empire's influence, to raise up Israel and to bring freedom. That's what they wanted Jesus to do. And so we can see that by the songs that they sang, the palms that they waved, and the cloaks that they laid down. So the songs that they sang, They're singing the Songs of Ascent, which is a group of psalms, and particularly they're singing Psalm 118, Hosanna to the Son of David. They weren't singing good theology. They were invoking the legacy of King David, the warrior king, the one who defeated Goliath, who brought the tribes together, who made Israel great. They weren't crying out for peace, they were calling out for a fight. And if that was the songs they were singing, then the palms that they were waving, they weren't just decoration, they had meaning. So palm branches were a symbol of military victory. They go all the way back to the Maccabean revolt. Look it up on Wikipedia. But as a guy called Judas Maccabeus, who led a successful Jewish rebellion against Greek rule. He reclaimed the temple and he restored Jewish freedom. The palm tree became a national symbol of liberation and triumph. Waving palms was the ancient Jewish equivalent of saying, let's rise up, or let's take our country back. So the crowd wasn't in a carnival spirit. They were fired up. They were saying, Jesus, be the hammer that breaks the Romans. And then there was the cloaks that they laid down. In ancient times, this act was a way to show deep respect for a ruler, much like we have a red carpet today. A similar gesture was seen in 2 Kings 9, verse 13. It goes like this: they quickly took their cloaks and spread them under him on the bare steps. Then they blew the trumpet and shouted, Jehu is king! What the crowd were doing in that act of placing their cloaks down for Jesus to walk on was a declaration. Be our king. Be the one who crushes our enemies. Be the one who makes Israel great again. Let me try and draw a modern equivalent if you haven't already got it. Think of the crowd with blue baseball caps on with the word MIGA, M-I-G-A on them. Make Israel great again. You may think it's a bit sketchy. How can you draw that analogy, Steve? Surely this is a carnival, not a revolution. But consider the context of the timing. It's freedom time. It's Passover. We learnt a lot about that last week, if you were here. The festival of freedom. The Jewish celebration of liberation from slavery in Egypt. If there was ever a time to show up and start a revolution, this was it. And Jesus did show up. But how did he show up? On a donkey. Not just on a donkey, but on a baby donkey. A colt. Picture this. A fully grown labourer sat on a tiny little donkey. He probably looked utterly ridiculous. This was not the image of a war hero, not the powerful stallion of a Roman general like Pilate, who would have entered Jerusalem the same week on a war horse, surrounded by soldiers. That's how Rome does it. That's how a real king shows up. Pilate was under pressure to not allow any more unrest to happen in the Roman province of Palestine. So we know historically that he entered Jerusalem not long before Jesus did on a large war horse, leading a garrison of troops to make the point of flexing his overwhelming military strength, to project the Pax Romana, Roman peace, pacification. But Jesus comes in the exact opposite way. He's fulfilling Zechariah's prophecy. Behold, your king comes to you gently and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. And yet the crowd keeps shouting, keeps demanding, save us now. Take the throne. Be the king we want you to be. But there's a heartbreaking part in this story. Luke tells us at the end of the triumphal entry, when Jesus enters into Jerusalem, what's his reaction? He weeps. He bursts into tears. He doesn't soak in the applause. He doesn't say, I've made it. He weeps. Why? Because they don't get it. Because they've misunderstood everything. Here's what Luke records. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, if you, even you, had known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it's hidden from your eyes. The crowd had a very Roman understanding of peace. They thought peace would come through power, through violence, through overthrowing the enemy. But Jesus is saying, no, that's not my way, that's not my peace. So now we understand the context of the timing. It's Passover. It's freedom time. But notice how the crowd turns. Perhaps like me, you've always wondered, how is it that the crowd that shouts for Jesus turns a few days later when Pilate offers them the choice, Jesus or Barabbas? And they shout for Barabbas. I never understood that. Why would anyone pick Barabbas? Surely Jesus is the good guy. We've read the whole of the rest of the Gospels. We know he healed the sick, he even raised the dead, for goodness sake. But as I understand Easter more, I realize they weren't rejecting Jesus the person. They were rejecting his way. Barabbas was a fighter, a revolutionary. He'd taken up arms against Rome. He was the hammer that the crowd wanted. He was the hammer that the crowd wanted Jesus to be. And Jesus, he came on a donkey. And church, this is where it hits home. You and me, we still face that choice. We have to decide which way we believe in. The way of the donkey or the way of the hammer? The way of self-giving love or the way of control and power? We're living in a time of great social change. The old order of global trade is finishing, and great nations are flexing their muscles. They're acting in a Barabbas way. Change is coming, and it feels like a hammer blow, a way of control and power. Now we can see that in the world, but let's be honest. Let me be honest with you. Sometimes I say I choose Jesus, but I act like I choose Barabbas. So every time I use my personal power over someone, like my lovely wife or my kids or my team, every time I try to win an argument by exaggerating or forcing my way, every time I get angry because someone challenges my beliefs or disrupts my comfort, I've chosen Barabbas. I've chosen the way of the hammer. Not because I hate Jesus, but because I'm still trying to get peace through strength, not surrender. Still trying to win the world by fighting it, not serving it. You see, we want the church to be strong, don't we? We particularly want the church to be strong in the UK. That would be amazing, that it could be a powerful influence on its community. But to do so, do we choose the way of the hammer or the donkey? It's going to be an interesting question for us. We're about to move to the biggest church in Aldershot that dominates the horizon, has gates, it even has a parade hill, for goodness sake. And it has a certain legacy. Hammer or donkey? Palm Sunday is not about triumph on our terms. It's about a king who says, my kingdom is not of this world. It's about a Messiah who refuses to conquer the world by crushing it and instead chooses to save it by dying for it. Jesus doesn't dish out the punishment. He takes the punishment. And that's the point of Easter. If Jesus came as God to punish the wicked, who would survive? Not me. My life at best is awkward and stumbling. And I'm certainly not as good as I think I am, or even as I want to be. So God came into the city of my life, not to dish out the punishment, but to take it on my behalf. Jesus is still riding into the city of your life. We live in a world where power is being flexed and projected in international politics, but also in the way we relate to one another. Flexing power is attractive, it's efficient, it promises control, but it offers a certain kind of peace, Roman peace, a pacification through dominance. Jesus is offering a different peace, not through power, but through love. And the question for us this Easter, as we go through Holy Week, is will we recognize him? Or will we cry Hosanna on the Sunday and crucify him by Friday? Because he's not always the king we want, but he's exactly the king we need.